Thank you all for coming on this rainy evening. We have several things to discuss before we get into the topic at hand. Number one, the minutes of the audit on March 26th. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I move their acceptance.
I'll second. Did a good job, Joe.
Thank you. And basically, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I will tell you that there is a misspelling on Odyssey. It's Odyssey, and I'll correct that. The 27th, the joint meeting. Any comments relative to that?
Move their acceptance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. There was one grammatical error there in item number 6. The word should be any, okay, and that has been corrected. So that's done.
You having a hard time these days?
I can't spell. All right, I never could spell. I mean, listen,
Spell check doesn't work.
I got technical degrees. I'm not literate. Okay, basically, we have a couple of things we're going to talk about. Let's start off with a couple of comments on the budget. The budget that has been circulated as part of the articles. Michael has circulated it to me and I to you. Basically, there are no changes on this document from the original document that we have discussed. Now, there is one change that could be contemplated by the select board. And that one change relates to the finance committee expense line, which is listed at it's listed out at 150,000. We've not spent that in prior years, and it could be the select board proposes to cut it back to 100,000.
The reserve fund,
The reserve fund.
not our.
No. It's the finance committee reserve fund.
What do you use it for?
We use it for year-end transfers typically.
Snow and ice, any emergency.
Emergency, yeah.
With our heating system.
And basically, it's the feeling of the town administrator, and I understand to some degree, members of the select board, that this be reduced to 100,000.
Do we have a history of how it's been used in the past?
Yes,
I was going to.
Michael has that
Okay.
history.
And when I say it was brought up at the last second, so I wasn't able to articulate it very well at the last meeting with the select board because it really wasn't discussed. And then all of a sudden it was brought up as a point. And I was like, okay, I'll take a look at that. That's part of Article 4. So I did look back at the historic use. So it was 100,000 up until 2015, and then from 15 forward, it was raised to 150. I know 2020 was 59, 2021 it was 72. 2022 was 148, and 2023 was 136. Let me caveat that, because the reason why the 2 first years were lower is we also did, in the last 2 months of the year, you're allowed to transfer funds between expense lines in the budget with the approval of both the select board and the finance committee. The last 2 years, we did no transfers we only did the reserve transfers at the end of the year from the reserve account to close out the budget. So this would, if we were to cut it back to 100, it would make it a little more, we would end up probably using some more of those transfers between department expenses. We ended up returning, last year, that's how we end up with our free cash by the excess that we have at the end of the year. So, could I work within 100,000? Yes. I can't say that I couldn't. I know that, be honest, I've said it to a couple is the North Adams reserve account was 75,000 on a $4 million budget. So,
Also, the department heads have to be more within their budget and not do caveat of everything that you want so that they know that we have the reserve fund.
Right.
That's only for emergencies, and we shouldn't be, I feel, shouldn't be going from department to cover one department from another. That's my feeling. Like, in other words, at the last couple of months, you can take, let's say, from Department X, $2,000 to cover Department Z.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right.
Well, Georgia, I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong, and I know you've always felt this way because
Right.
budgets are dynamic. They very much, there's, I think, a reasonably high level of predictability, but as in all human affairs, things go bump in the night and budgets do change. And
Right.
department budgets change, and there is a need from time to time to make those transfers in order to cover changes in budgets. Hugh, do you have line item changes that occur during the course of the year?
Oh, but this isn't even just line items, Steve. This is from one department to another.
I understand that, but
Satisfying a budget that couldn't be met because of an unexpected expense, whilst,
Or a decision to purchase something that they may not need, but they have money in the budget. They're like, oh,
or
look
that
at
they
this.
may have really needed.
Well, okay, that's a management issue. This typically is for snow and ice,
Yes.
equipment maintenance, unanticipated equipment maintenance. It could be, I don't know, would overtime cover it if there was an emergency situation and we had to assign police and fire and so forth?
Well, technically the reserve, any of them can be used. I mean, one of the reasons why they passed the Municipal Relief Act, if you look, that allowed the last 2 months, is it does allow you with that flexibility, because before that, your only option was the reserve account. So therefore, the reserve accounts had to be larger because you didn't have the flexibility. And the only reason why with that, going back to North Adams with a $44 million budget, why I was able to is right. We would take from one department that didn't, because think about it, even if we're 99% accurate on our budget, we're still off by 70,000.
Yeah.
So we're a $7 million budget when you take out the school. So even if we're 99% accurate, a 1% off is still 70,000 off. So it doesn't take much to end up slightly off, especially with prices as fluctuating as they have been the last couple of years, especially. That's at least my opinion of the use of those. That
the price of gasoline went up
That's one
Well, I
of the
get-
things
5%
that
this week.
Right. I understand that. Those
It's going to
are,
happen.
I think we're having an academic discussion because if the select board, decides to do this, right now, it's as it stands, I mean, if the town administrator feels that he can operate within the confines of this line item, I wouldn't dispute that. So,
You mean,
let's see where.
drop it down to 100,000?
go along with the select
Yeah,
board's recommendation
absolutely.
to go down to 100?
Yeah.
I agree.
and right now it's only a thought.
Yeah.
It really wasn't, it was just briefly discussed, wasn't anything. I just didn't have the facts and figures in front of me because it came up
Yeah.
at the meeting and we hadn't even
That's good to
broached
know.
the subject, so I
One
wasn't
section.
fully prepared to speak on it. Well, I'm more prepared tonight.
Jim?
Well, nobody knows, we all have a pretty good idea that costs are not going to remain the same. They're going to go up pretty substantially over the near future. So my concern would be if you reduce it from 150 to 100, we run into the possibility of being short there. I don't know.
I don't think so, but like I said, I would caution that I might be coming back with some of those interdepartment transfers that instead of just going to the reserve fund.
Well, that could happen in your departments too. I mean, if costs explode on a particular thing, it may go through several of the
On your,
departments.
and I will,
Depending upon what, not just gas going up, but other things.
if it was something that hugely impacted the budget, one of the things you can do is you can hold a town meeting during the year to address the current year. Now, that would be an extraordinary
Yeah, we-
something. The circulator goes at the sewer plant and it's a
Well, that's a-
$750,000. Those are completely different scenarios.
You know, based on the size of the budget, I'm not sure it's worth spending any more time discussing it. To be honest with you, I don't mean to cut the conversation off, but let's see what the select board decides. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, ultimately the decision is theirs to make, and you know, we either support it or not.
Well-
I have no problem with it
I
personally.
mean, won't they want our opinion?
I would think.
Yeah.
So can't we assume that they want 100,000 and we should express our opinion on that now? I mean, what are we waiting for?
I have no problem with that, you know? Do you want to take a vote on that?
No, I don't think that we need to take a vote on that. I mean, first of all, we don't know that they've actually taken this position. They're having this discussion. So until such time as they take a position on it, I think it's premature on our part to say anything more.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Okay, so we hold.
Jamie has a point.
Jamie? Jamie, you're muted.
Why is she on the screen?
Her hand is up.
Oh, but she's been on the screen the whole time the meeting started.
Okay, well,
Is it her hand? I can't,
Yeah, she has her hand up.
okay.
she's muted.
Don't you recognize her hand, Jim?
Okay.
Oh, I recognize her name.
So as far as the budget goes, that's the only. Jamie, you had a comment on the,
Unmute.
you unmute.
Can't hear you.
And pull over if you're driving.
She is unmuted on her system. So it's her microphone that's not.
You hear me?
Yep, there we
Yeah.
go.
Go
All
ahead.
right. That point came up at the end of the meeting by one member, and we didn't discuss it at the meeting. But my opinion is, that for $50,000 and an $11 million budget, it's not a lot of money. And I don't know. I don't think we should make a big fuss out of it. That Michael should have enough money to work with. Did you hear me?
Yes, oh, yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's, you
That was
know,
all I have to share from that point, if it's helpful.
okay. All right, so we'll sit tight on this for the time being, and we'll go from there.
I mean, what's the difference?
And that's,
If you don't spend it, it goes back.
that's all that there is on the operating budget that's changed. Is that- Anybody have any other questions on the operating budget right now? Okay, the thought that I do have, and I want to raise it before we adjourn this meeting, is that the next week,
Wow.
Thursday, we're not adjourning the meeting yet. So don't hold your breath. Next week,
There's always
there's a
hope.
select board meeting on Thursday evening, and they're going to vote for the operating budget and the articles that you have. And I think the following week, the week of the 22nd of April through the 25th, we should have a meeting to vote for this material in advance of the Babytown meeting. So we'll talk about dates on that. But that's just FYI. So,
Jay, may I just?
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing. And this is the comment really for Mike more than anyone else. George and I both remember the shortages that we encountered in the snow and ice budget when the price of salt went through the roof and we had difficulty getting it.
Right.
And we were, do you remember the size of the fund that we had at the time? It was well under $100,000. We were so underfunded.
For the snow and ice.
For snow and
it was
ice.
More like 60 or
I remember
50,000.
that too.
And we had real not arguments, but we had discussions at town meetings about increasing that. And we never got it higher than $90,000. I remember that. So maybe we don't have snow, but We get plenty of ice.
Yeah, we do.
So,
So the only thing you have to remember with snow and ice is once you increase the budget, then that sets your new floor.
I know that.
And you are allowed to deficit spend
Right.
the snow and ice. That actually Hugh has the authority to do that himself.
Right.
Then at the end of the year, you have two choices, which is you can either clean it up with a reserve account transfer, or you can go to your annual town meeting and you can do the work of the current year and the upcoming year. So you can address snow and ice at the annual town meeting. Because if you don't, it by default carries over in your tax.
Yeah.
And then it's just made up in the tax rate itself. So that one's probably the one we least have to worry about.
That's
just
true.
because
You're
you have the
right.
town meeting
You're right.
before and you have the ability to just raise it on the tax rate. So.
Okay, let's, if we can, if there is nothing else on the operating budget, I'd like to move into Article number 9, which basically, a lot of these things represent capital acquisition. Michael, you want to take us through them?
Yeah, so after we met on the capital items with the select board and the finance committee joint meeting, we put together everything. I did have, so the one that is not in here is the radios for the police department.
And I don't see the hoses for the fire department.
There were the two articles. One is that we think that between the hoses and the air, posi air fans that the chief wants, we're gonna try to buy two of those out of his budget. We're gonna work the rest of it because we have leftover money in there. It still looks good. So it looks like we're gonna have some spare money there. So instead of raising it as a separate article, we're gonna buy out of there. Two of them, he wants to get 5, but what the plan is, we're gonna get 2, possibly 3, and then next year, if we have any surplus left in the fire, we'll get it there, through there. The radios, we decided to pull out because we're gonna be coming next year with a plan on how to address EMS, fire, police, everything. Once we decide on what course of action the town wants to take, it's going to dictate what we need for radio equipment across the board. So instead of handling one department, what most likely will happen will be a plan to address public safety across the board on new radios, because we're going to need them for if we go to an ambulance call, or if we end up adding ambulance, if we add that, we're going to have to add additional equipment. So we think we just come with a overall plan, communication plan for all of public safety for next year.
So does he feel the radios they have now are gonna work, or does he? And he has enough of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
he has enough, he has the rest. The only thing that he was reaching out, and this may come back to the select board, is whether the repeaters, if we get them now, would help with their coverage gaps. But still, if we get them, will they still help when we get the newer radios? We don't want to invest in something that's on its way out.
Yeah.
And I should know that by the next selectmen's meeting. But the big cost is off the table for a year. Well, we come up with a comprehensive communication plan for the entire public safety.
Makes sense.
Okay, did you have a point?
No, I just said it makes sense.
Number 3, yeah, Michael.
Oh, the transfer and to pay off the remaining balance. Yeah, we have bond anticipation note for the highway trucks. Those are redone each year. So it's just a note that's redone each year. There's 95,800. I have the exact number. So we're just going to get it because there might be some fees there. We just want to clean it off the books, and then whatever's remaining, they'll get back on. So it's just cleaning off our books a little bit. And we'll end up paying a higher interest rate because right now those notes are just singular year notes instead of a long range bond. So, the bridge, we all know the bridges. So, the object now is to set some money aside so we can engineering the rest while we also search for Mass DOT money, federal money, or any other money that can assist us in the bridges.
Is that the 500,000, is that planning for both bridges or 3? We still have what, 3?
Were you talking about Tuckerman you talk about the.
Everett Road.
Everett, and you talk about the one in,
Glendale.
yeah.
So let me walk you through all
Glendale.
three.
Okay,
So Averitt Road right now is in the final stages of design through a small bridge grant, 100,000 that we received last year. We can't go after the construction phase until the design phase is completed. Once the construction phase is completed, I'm going to apply for up to $600,000 for the second bridge. That was anticipated to be approximately $1 million, that bridge. We borrowed, when we did the borrowing, we had 400,000 set aside in there to cover that difference. Is there a question on the Averitt one?
yeah. The question I have on the average one, when you're talking about design and all that and the expenses, I would think they could have just used the same design they had for the current.
They actually have to run the hydrology and the rest because it's a different channel.
Right.
The channel splits there. It's basically treated like a separate bridge. And yeah,
They came and drilled about 2 months ago.
yeah, those were the
They made
bore
a mess.
samplings.
Yes.
Kind of getting a sense of what the,
Depth and
Right,
everything,
Yeah.
yeah.
right. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you have to set your foundations on
yeah.
stone or you have to sheet, so they had to do bore sampling, it's called. So all that stuff is in process. Then we'll go after the 600,000.
But
We are
that's a next year item.
most likely in next year. Yep. And we have the 400,000 right now set aside in that original borrowing we did of 4 million, anticipating that. It's just taking a little longer to get we got bounced from one engineer to another. So it used to be the towns went out and actually hired an engineer. Now the state hires the engineer and the state works with the engineer to approve the design. They did that mainly because they had an engineer design a bridge. They put up the bridge and then DOT ordered them to take down the bridge because yeah. So they said, nope. So they have to pre-certify the engineers. You get assigned an engineer and then you work with that group.
Was that the bridge in South County where?
I have no idea what bridge
they
it
saved
was,
a huge
but
amount of money and by having it done by a private contractor, and that bridge was excellent. They made it tear them out and start over.
yeah, maybe could have been. So that one's that. The Tuckerman right now is in Chapter 85 review. We've submitted everything. It's in the review process as we speak. There's a couple things that we had to apply for, a couple waivers as far as we have flooding behind it. We have the original abutments. I might have mentioned this. If you have abutments that are in the river, if you were to design a bridge nowadays, those abutments have to be outside the river channel. So we have to ask for a waiver. There's nothing wrong with the abutments that we have. Now you will have to put some sheathing behind, they will have to basically bury a pier behind it, but use the abutment in order to get it down to actual stone. So that's all been designed, looked out. Right now, because they're probably going to require some of that, he anticipates it's going to be about 200,000 more than originally. We had $2.2 million set aside of the original 4 million that we borrowed toward the Tuckerman. And obviously that whole number was based on the predicate we weren't having to redo the foundations, that we would just be doing the structure on top. Because if you get into having to put new foundations, it would have more than doubled the cost of the bridge. So it looks good right now that we're not going to have to. So
What's the anticipated start date on that then?
I will have a better idea of that once we get approval, because then we'll be able to go out to bid. But if we were to get approval this summer, we'd go out to bid this winter, we'd be looking at the construction season of next summer. So, yeah. And that's going to be anywhere up to 18 months. So of construction. And obviously a whole bunch of things can get in the way of that. So, that one. Glendale Bridge, I did contract for initial engineering assessments to be done by Ty and Bond. They've already been up, they've already been doing the work, and they're supposed to get me some preliminary ideas of numbers and the rest that by the end of this month. That's why I'm asking for the 500,000 to be set aside so that we can begin construction drawings and get us as far along as we can. Once you get to about 75% construction drawings, then you can start applying for, because they'd be considered, I know George has heard the term, shovel ready. So then we can move the projects into potential grants and other stuff. They want to know that we have solid numbers of what's anticipated for.
The Interlake and Cross Bridge,
This is the Glendale.
Glendale Middle
Very-
Bridge.
Is that what you're calling the Glendale Bridge?
Yeah.
I'm asking about the
Tuckerman's Bridge?
No,
Curtisville.
Curtisville.
Curtisville?
Curtisville.
That's
Yeah.
Nowhere.
that's
nowhere,
nowhere.
nowhere.
That one's, well, I do have the assessment coming with some recommendations on potential future.
Yeah, because that's still open as to whether it's going to be a pedestrian bridge or a bridge or whatever.
Very complicated situation, Ed. That bridge, historically, we got federal monies for that bridge. There is a time limit if you don't build it within a certain time frame.
Well, there was a Mass Historical Society planning grant or Mass Historical Commission planning grant that was done in 2015. It set up the parameters of some work that could be done on the bridge, the rest and everything. So once you take that grant for 10 years, there's a deed restriction placed on the grant, on the structure, that anything we try to do needs approval from the Mass Historical Commission. After 2015, because we didn't take construction money, if you take construction money, it's forever. We didn't take construction money, so after 2025, technically, the town can do what it wants with that bridge as far as whatever decisions we want to make. I know the original plans were rejected by Mass Historical Society that were developed in 2015. I don't know if that was you, Georgia, or some right after you, 2016 or 17, the plans
After
were
me.
brought forward. I think you got the grant,
Yeah, I got the grant.
but the work
Nothing.
actually happened after and that.
Right.
So, and those plans were rejected by Mass Historical because of you have to maintain the bridge. They're not interested in rebuilding the bridge because a rebuilt bridge, even if you use the original stone and the rest, is still a new bridge. It's not the historic bridge. You have to be saving the historic structure itself and that.
What a country.
Yeah, so it's, it is. So 2020 we'll be able to make, but I did have an assessment being done. I have seen some of the preliminary plans for it, and I will be presenting that at some point, probably in June, to the select board as far as what some of the options are going forward as far as that bridge. Obviously maybe not obviously, but it got pushed back a little bit in priority when the Glendale happened. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff to consider going forward as far as bridges. I am also a believer, and I don't want anybody to think this means anytime we have an issue like Glendale, we should be looking at why was the bridge put in? Bridge still needed, or buildings or anything that we do, we should be looking at, because maybe the reasons why something was there 50, 70 years ago might not be true today. So, what are the options and which ones should we be looking at? So, once we have assessments of what it will take to fix the bridge, then we can look at, okay, here's the cost, here's the rest, what's the purpose of that bridge? And then, should we be investing or not into that going forward? So, yeah.
Number 5.
That would be just funding again for other engineering We're trying to get as many projects shovel ready. So as grants and other things become available, we can try to jump on them as quickly as possible. Just allows us to just not worry too much about getting those projects in. Right now, we're using, some of the, I did use some of it as part of our share for the culvert money we had last year to finish up the culvert assessment. And I know that's something right now that Hugh and Christine are working on a grant with HVA for Rattlesnake culvert. And I'm using
183.
no, and I'm going after a strap grant for up to $1 million for the Shadow Brook box culvert. We basically can use those assessments as part of the reason why we're going to make these repairs. So hopefully what we're doing again is parlaying small amounts of money to get larger amounts. Just think it's prudent at this time if you can get your plans to that level so that we can be moving ahead. The next couple are all the highway department purchases.
Yep.
Structural painting of the transfer station, which will just prolong the wait down there. We left 8,000 in for the Taconic, transportation and tuition in, we didn't have anybody for years. Now we have 2 students. We think it's a temporary one. And, whether or not it's in the operating budget or whether it's out of this, it's still out of town funds either way. Right now, we're hoping that in a couple of years, we won't have anybody again. And maybe by then we have partial
Do
technical.
we know what year
program.
these
They'll
students?
be sophomores next year. Yep.
Second year.
And then, so the last one is when we're all done with the highway garage, final payments to Marks, it ended up $25,122 over, for total cost. There was a lot involved in that, and that comes back to from 2 years of storing equipment in another community. That project definitely took longer than was expected. $2 million project. Final costs are all in, and that's what it would do, just clear off our books. Right now, it sat last year as a negative against our free cash. So this year, we just like to clean up the books when we get it off at that point. This wasn't an individual this was the final payout as far as the retainer took us over by 25,122. Overall, I don't think it's anything terrible. I will point to that project and say it does point to the fact that we should always have construction oversight on any project of substantial cost.
Definitely.
That just makes sure that you don't have these long-term costs. And I will caution that there are some elements that we are currently examining at the highway garage that should be addressed so that we get as much life out of that building as we can. It's a decent building. That's as far as I'd label it, even though it's brand new. Yeah.
No, I didn't put.
That doesn't say much for
Yeah.
the building.
Number 10, Article 10.
Article 10 are your sewer appropriations. So right now we're looking to put for various sewer line replace 138,000, 12,000 for sludge pump demolition reinstallation. These are things that were proposed by it, which gives us a remaining balance in the sewer surplus of 41,105. And if, as you remember, anything not appropriated out of the sewer account at the end of the year needs to be used for reducing the amount to be raised. Even though it's technically, we say reducing, it's actually going to keep the rate where it is. But if you didn't have it, it could mean more. I asked legal, is there any other way to word it? And they said, no, it's really is just doing that. And you're going to see that the same thing with the water department. So we identified purchases that would be used from hydrants to the water plant. This is Article 11. And you'll see a lot of those are just small ones recommended by Mike Buffoni and the Water and Sewer Commission. And the big one is taking a balance of 450 and beginning the replacement of various water mains throughout town. So we're going to just put the money into repairs that are needed across the town. It keeps a balance in that account of 62,278, which will be, once again, for the purpose of reducing the amount to be raised. Once again, it will allow us to maintain the rate where it is. And then any surplus next year. So every year you're going to see whatever surplus is there. If they don't appropriate the surplus for use, the surplus goes back to the rate users. So, and we've we've come up with our own justification sheet that as long as we're within 85 to 100%, expenses to income, we won't adjust the rate. If we get beyond that, we'll either raise or lower the rate as appropriate. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the biggest change. So I don't know if we should anticipate some people asking questions as to why, but it's probably the biggest change in the way things have historically been done. So, yes.
I assume that what we're going to be doing is voting on the article. But, we're not going to be doing individual votes on each of
unless there's a hold.
Unless there's a hold. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So these are consent warrants.
Yeah.
So we started this last year. So we'll read off every one. And unless somebody asks for an individual component of the article to be held, we'll just vote on the whole thing. So unless there's a request by the audience, but we should be prepared in case there is
Yeah.
a request to obviously speak on any of the subjects. So. Yeah. Article 12 is the community preservation ones. I know Jay reviewed the minutes of the community preservation. And I have sent this over to them, and these are all the articles that were supported by this year's community preservation committee. So if there's any one in particular you would like me to go over, I can, as best to my knowledge of what I know about it, each of the ones, because I was at the meetings this year because Erica, who oversees the CPC now, was out on maternity leave. So, yeah.
Number 10. For painting the Garrieri building.
Yes. And we checked with the legal, and it is something that we are allowed to do. So that's the Tree on Main building.
It's where Main Street Market is, that building.
Okay, but it's a privately owned building, right?
CPC money can be used on private property. It's one of the few, we can't use general funds, we can't use taxation fund except for CPC funds on private. And they have to meet the criteria, has to be
It's a
a historic building, has to be, we can't just paint anybody's. It has to meet certain legal criteria, was vetted by legal counsel and was approved as a legal use, and then the committee voted to support it.
But it has Norman Rockwell written all over it, and
Yeah.
you get the money.
Go ahead,
The other
Jim.
one is 13. For Kripalu. And I'm just going to state my personal opinion, and that is that I don't think CPC funds should be paid to nonprofits who pay nothing under the pilot program.
But they do.
Well, for years they had. I don't think they have the last several years.
Oh, I don't know. We had an agreement with them.
It expired during COVID, and then with
They were
COVID, they were also closed. So
Right.
that is something that
They're back open.
to visit.
They're the largest hotel in Berkshire County. They make a lot of money.
On
Put
the
a
other
hold on
hand,
it
Jim,
and have a discussion.
Yeah, I will.
but Jim,
Yeah, it's fine.
even if they don't contribute to a pilot program, they do spin off revenues for the rest of the town. People who come to Kripalu and take courses there, have lunch here.
I understand that, but
I'm just saying you shouldn't look at Kripalu as a standalone, isolated silo kind of that needs to support the CPC through pilot payments. It would be nice if they made pilot payments. It would be nice if all these entities made pilot payments, but if they don't, I don't think that means we cut them off at the knees.
well, that's your opinion.
Yeah,
My
that's
opinion
right.
is they're the largest hotel, and now that COVID is over with and they're up and their nice article on the complete restoration, they're making money hand over fist in there. That's the bottom line. And yes, some of their people come and eat in other places, but the bulk of people that go to Kripalu also eat there. They stay there and they eat there.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the town gets as much extraneous revenue from, and I'm not trying to be mean to Kripalu. My opinion is that any nonprofit who can't pay something in lieu of taxes should not be receiving taxpayer funds. That's just my opinion.
I would submit to you that the committee is aware of was aware of the pilot nature of Kripalu, number one. Number two, you're talking about invasive species. You're not talking about physical plant restoration or renewal and so forth. You're talking about $1,700. And, basically people do hike around on that property and so forth. So, fine, we could debate this forever.
Oh, but I just want to follow up on your comment by saying, for a business that makes that much money, $1,723 for invasive species mitigation, is like me going over to Michael's and buying lunch for $4. Okay, I can't get lunch for $4.
I think you'll find also that they lost some money with the flood that they had, so, but-
Jay, wait a minute. Jim has the right to put
Absolutely.
a hold on that and have the discussion in the town meeting. I don't think that we need to have
no,
the
I
discussion.
mean,
about that
I hate to be argumentative about something. It's,
I don't disagree.
to me, it's the,
When do you hate that?
okay.
it's the philosophy.
It's enough.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Michael. Where are we?
Um,
That's,
yep, so unless there's another, any others on number 12?
no,
So number 13, we were about to issue the grant assurance letter just a couple months ago to Chesterwood for last year's CPC. We realized that the CPC article never made it to town meeting. So this is an FY '24 correction. So it was already approved by CPC the year before, and this is just correcting that it never went to town meeting.
Oh,
Number 14 is being proposed to become a climate leader. This is a resolution to support the climate change. While there is no direct cost, there are some things that will be decided down the road, such as expanding upon the stretch code even further for the building and other items of whether the town wants to take it on. This is one of the first steps of what could be multiple steps, and if we end up wanting to be a climate leader, we'd have to follow all of them. What this will allow us to get a planning money from the Green Communities Program, and would allow us to at least develop a pathway toward becoming a climate leader.
Who proposed this?
It's coming from the Green Committee to the select board.
Georgia.
Do I say it? So with this whole climate thing,
yeah.
it's a possibility they might discuss having geothermal in this building again. And we all know that it all failed. And if we have closed wells, then there'll be multiple holes throughout here, the park, and everything. So I just want to caution everybody.
well, I mean, there's nothing in here that.
Right, there isn't.
That is
but-
going to require that, and the appropriation to do that is.
There's no funds involved.
Right, I'm just saying,
A long
let's
way-
be, look
a long way.
at that. Well, I think of the future, I might not be here, so I want it on the record.
I mean, the only question that I would ask Mike is that it's an initial step.
Yes.
Does it lock us into a course of action?
No, not at this point. But the next votes that will come probably the next year, which will include the expanded stretch code and others,
Stretch code.
will start locking us into.
Okay,
So this is the first step. It will allow us to create what's called a framework for becoming a climate leader. It will address how we're going to do it and part of that will be saying, this is how we're going to get to be decarbonized by 2050. But at this point, it's only a resolution, it's only a framework. And then from there, we'd have to adopt the stretch. So the next steps after this will be the things that will lock us in.
Do we, if we further engage in many regional activities, whether it be ambulance or whatever, do the other communities that we partner with also have to adopt this? Or if they don't, what does that do to us?
Not 100% sure. More than likely, it'd be whichever community's the lead community would have to meet whatever obligations they've set. So if we're the lead on the ambulance, whatever
And
condition on vehicles and other stuff would come in.
let's just assume for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
the community X, the one that we're to partner with, chooses not to do that,
Yeah.
what then?
Like I said, it would, if we're the lead one and we're obligated to buy fuel efficient, whatever.
Yeah, but they're not obligated
But they're
to
not,
appropriate the money to do that.
right. So it could, I guess theoretically. Now, remember, part of this is that the state is basically looking to make every community by 2050. This gets us in line for some grants, but then the question is, do we want to be the leader? So do we want to be the first?
I know you can't answer the questions now.
Right. And I think the study and the framework would answer some of those moving forward, that would come out of this. And then if we adopt that framework and we adopt the stretch code and all the other stuff, then we're locking ourselves in. So this first step does not lock us in, but the next steps, in my opinion, will.
And it would also seem that you'd need to have some definitive plan developed that would incorporate all the communities and what they have to subscribe to participate. You know, that you can't just pull it out of the air. There's going to be a cooperative agreement between multiple communities, right?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, our framework's gonna be our framework. Well, it's gonna be the same typical framework of any community that decides to become a climate leader. Right. Which is basically buying on to the governor's 2050 plan of decarbonizing the
What's
state.
the stretch thing? What is stretch?
An additional building code requirements on buildings above and beyond the current. We're already in one of the highest levels because we adopted the initial stretch code money when we became a green communities. This is even taking it one step further and adopting some additional requirements above and beyond.
Like insulation.
Insulation levels, electrical requirements and alternative energies and everything else, so.
Well, this new stretch code, will that involve the mandated elimination of gas ranges and gas stoves?
More than likely,
They'll be in use for heat?
might be, yeah, it might be.
I mean,
But what'll come from this is what the next step is. But the goal right now is to decarbonize the state by 2050. I know they want no sale of electric vehicles by 2035. No sale of gas vehicles by 2035, decarbonization by 2050. It's an ambitious plan laid out by the state. And right now, this just allows us to get a planning grant to look at how we would do that. And then we have to decide if, after we get the planning grant, get the planning document, whether or not we want to move forward with being a climate leader and being one of those lead communities. And
so we have a little time to worry about that. There's a lot of steps that are going to go into this. This is not a slam dunk.
No.
Okay.
16 and 17 are not financial ones, but they are about making some positions elected to appointed.
15 and 16, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, did I say? I apologize, 15, 16. 17 does, so right now, in order for us to continue to use the recycling at the state recycling center, is they're asking everybody to get agreements from your town meetings to go 5 years. So under Mass General Law, the select board through me can only go up to 3 years without town meeting approval to go beyond. So this is just because is it the MRF? Is that what it's called in Springfield? Yeah. That right now they want to go to 5-year contracts. So they're asking everybody that participates in their programming to go to that. So I think that's a pretty straightforward one. 18 does have a financial impact because this does mean that if the town was to accept by gift the parking lot at the end of Park Street, that we would own both sides of the bridge, which means if you own both sides of the bridge, you own the bridge. Right now, we own one side, Laurel Hill owns the other, but Laurel Hill was the ones that constructed the bridge. So right now, ownership of that bridge is by Laurel Hill. So they've asked about having the town take over ownership because they really want to just focus on conservation land, not on
Spend the money to
structure.
Yeah.
That's right.
We did have an engineering assessment done. We think the estimate is about 90,000 to replank, new steel cables, the rest. We set aside $100,000 of ARPA funds to do that work. So if the town was to accept the bridge, we would go out to bid on getting the work done on the Mary Hopkins Goodrich Bridge.
So using ARPA funds, and don't they have to be used by like December 26th?
Need to be appropriated this year and then need to be used by the year after. So,
Okay.
yep. So right now, we think we're in good shape to take on that, but long-term, it's obviously taking on another structure. So it does obviously have an impact long-term, so.
At this point, the engineering studies, did I hear you say they're really planning on just replacing the cables
The cables and then the planking.
Thanks.
and the planks?
Yep.
Okay.
The end stone are in good shape, so they evaluate all that. I will send through Jay the assessment done to all the members, because we're gonna put it up on our website anyways, so people are aware of the engineering assessment that was done on that bridge, because right away I said, we need to know what we're getting into.
Yeah,
right.
Because if the ends are in bad shape, you would be talking
Big money.
multiples of cost.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And that's it at this point. So I am anticipating to take this to the select board on the 18th. I'm anticipating that we probably will be able to vote everything and finalize the warrant then. And then move forward from there. So unless there's any other questions from this.
Just a couple of thoughts. After the select board meeting on the 18th, the following week, April 22nd through 25th, I need to get some dates from everybody, what works. Because we need to have our meeting to vote. You know,
Maybe town meeting?
no,
Oh.
this is following the select board
Okay.
recommendation. So, any thoughts?
when is the annual town meeting?
That Monday's out, the rest,
May 20th. It's one of the latest. It's pretty late.
Yeah,
the 22nd through the 26th.
Yep, of April. What does that Thursday look like? I don't have the town calendar. The 25th, April 25th.
25th. Yeah, I can check tomorrow, the calendar. I don't have it on.
Okay,
Terry and Tammy.
Day of the week is that?
Thursday
Thursday is the 25th.
I should be good.
works for me.
Thursday,
25th is Thursday.
it works for me.
Okay, yes? All right, so look, we will tentative and subject is 4/25 next FinCom.
It's obviously subject
I
to
will-
the selectmen approving the
Yeah,
warrant.
absolutely. And then the baby town meeting, we generally do it a week before the actual town meeting. What does May 13th look for everybody? Because the actual town meeting is the 20th.
That's not Friday.
It's a Monday.
I know, I'm joking.
It's fine.
That evening is okay for me,
Yep,
of the Monday, 13th.
yes, it's a Monday.
I should be okay. I'm not aware of anything, but I have to check the calendar when
All right, I will send a note around
Phone.
after I check with Michael on the
I'm not checking my
25th.
Yeah, mine's in the truck.
Is there any other business to come before?
I move we adjourn.
I second.
What time do you have?
It is 6:53.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.